So there's been a lot of parallels being drawn in the media between Brexit and the US election, in particular the Trump campaign. This video will be looking at the similarities and differences between the two, and we'll use Brexit to try and determine the US election result. So Brexit started as a result of the UK Independence Party, led by this guy, gaining momentum in elections because of the resentment towards the EU. Resentment firstly formed as a result of poorer Eastern European countries being allowed into the EU, which meant we had to subsidise those countries and receive free movement of immigrants. Then there was the Greek financial crisis and the fall in the euro. The UK is a member of the EU, though not directly part of the euro. It was still affected by its neighbour crashing. There was growing Euroscepticism from the Prime Minister's own Conservative Party to hold the vote and get rid once and for all of the competition, UKIP. So in 2015 David Cameron put it in the manifesto they would hold the vote. They won the election, and so on June the 23rd the UK held a referendum. In America, after the Iraq War, a war which most modern people agree was carried out under false pretenses, there was growing sense that the establishment couldn't be trusted. So Donald Trump built some towers and did The Apprentice, and Hillary Clinton was the First Lady and then Secretary of State for a few years. The Republicans had 17 candidates to begin with, and despite being seen as back of the pack, Donald Trump was left as the only one. Whereas Hillary faced stiff opposition from Bernie Sanders, who took it right to the wire before admitting defeat. Back in Britain, David Cameron was working on how to phrase the question of the referendum, so he decided on a Remain or Leave vote instead of the yes-no vote that won him the Scottish referendum. America has a two-party system which is equally as binary. Let's face it, the third-party candidates aren't going to win. It has been polled that voters have become even more divided in the past few years. Admittedly, the EU referendum just affects the UK's status within the EU, whereas the American election affects policy for the next 4 years. However, it's more or less considered to be a permanent decision that affects anything from the economy to immigration, whereas the election is relatively temporary. Before the referendum, everyone from Jeremy Clarkson to David Beckham was in favour of staying in the EU, and so were 90% of MPs. Trump claims news outlets are against him, as are many Republican candidates. The majority of the polls throughout the EU referendum predicted we would vote to stay in. Equally, the majority of the polling in America predicts Trump will lose. A week before the referendum, however, polls showed signs we may vote leave, and as a result the pound dropped. The dollar has also dropped as polls rise in favour of Trump. In the UK, our Chancellor George Osborne said he would have to invoke an emergency budget to appease the economy after uncertainty after the Brexit vote. This was labelled Project Fear, and it turned out the economy was actually pretty stable. Any economic fear mongering could have the same effect against the establishment of America, who favour Clinton. Nigel Farage, the UKIP guy, was a key player in Brexit. He so happens to now be advising Trump on his speeches. The whole EU vote was led by arrogance from David Cameron, that he'd win the referendum. In the wake of the polls, up until recently, Hillary Clinton has been equally as arrogant. UK citizens voted for Brexit in favour of sovereignty and tighter controls on immigration. Part of that immigration concern is paralleled across the pond, particularly about fear of terrorism. In the UK we get our news nationally, and international news is presented in the same bulletins. Regional news comes afterwards. In the US, however, news companies tell stories from that state and the regions around it. It's quite striking then that the UK chooses to close itself off more from the world, and the US is even less aware of the international concern for Trump than we are. After the result, a lot of MP Remainers promised to remain as much as possible, even have the vote again. It's even gone to the High Court, who have decided it will have to be voted on by Parliament. It could take months and years to happen. Donald Trump has also said if the result is not decisive, he won't accept it. He won't accept the will of the people. If Hillary wins by only a margin, the political and legal dispute surrounding him and her emails could go on for months. Having said all this, I still think women's issues will be the clincher for Hillary Clinton winning, but that she may be booed and protested against if she wins. And another thing, Brexit was led by this guy with bad hair. The election is led by this guy with bad hair. Thanks for watching, subscribe, comment, and check out my other videos. One love, life, V2D heart for life.